quite apart from wondering what is it that makes people look at Donald Trump and think that's the man I believe is qualified to be president and is a better option than anybody else who ran in the last campaign cycle, apart from that, sometimes I look at events as they unfold and I think, okay, well, why do they stay with him, given the way things are going down? So for the past several years, a big segment of the electorate has been trained, very, very energetically and successfully trained, that Obamacare is to be hated, that the Affordable Care Act is making their life worse, that it is undercutting their values, that the people who represent them in Washington are heroically trying over and over again, having vote after vote after vote to repeal Obamacare, and Obama sitting in the White House in the Oval Office keeps vetoing these repeal votes, but if they can just give control of Washington, D.C. to their own political party, then they can be freed from the Affordable Care Act. Well, they control all the branches of government now. And watching them try to repeal the Affordable Care Act and not doing it, I wonder, why is it that the people who support them don't see this? From time to time, when I'm teaching my classes, I come up with my own crackpot analogies. The one that ran through my head on this one, it borders on a parable. Bear with me for a second, but I thought about what if there was a town, and let's say this town, there was living near the edge of town a big old poisonous snake that had a very, very painful bite. And as the people in the town walked around from time to time, the snake would make its way in and bite one of them, and they would suffer terribly and maybe even die if they couldn't get medical help in time. And someone ran for office saying, I am the one who can finally kill this snake, and I can stop your fear, and I can stop your pain, and I can protect you from dying. And so that person won the next election, and then spent months saying, you know what? I have 3 different guns. One of them is green, one of them is blue, and one of them is orange. I can't decide which color gun I want to shoot the snake with. And every day just said, nope, haven't decided yet. And meanwhile, people kept getting bitten by the snake, kept suffering pain, kept dying. Would they continue to support this person that they had voted into office? Why would they? Why would that make any sense at all? And I don't, by the way, believe that the Affordable Care Act is an awful thing that does damage to a lot of people. I think it's imperfect. It needed to be the first step. It needed to be refined by legislation that would address some of its failings. But it was definitely progress, and the attempts, the proposals for legislation that'll repeal it have been so clumsy and really would inflict just such devastating suffering that you see why none of these bills have been passed. But you wonder, why does that block of the electorate not get it? Another example, a smaller example, Trump's budget came out several weeks back, and one of the things that it absolutely slashes is farm insurance. Well, guess which way the farmer vote broke in the election? It didn't break for Hillary, I'll say that. And yet, you don't find a big swing in Donald Trump's support, even though some of these insurance programs, a lot of farmers really could not make a viable go of their business if they didn't have some backing. And yet, it does not seem to shift their support of him that he wants to be the person to take that away. What all of this got me to thinking about, I am old enough that I can actually remember after the Rodney King verdict came in back in the early 1990s. Back when Rodney King was pursued by a number of police officers. They pulled him over. He was acting out. I believe he was on drugs at the time, and it was caught on video that the police officers used a whole lot of force in subduing him. They took nightsticks, and several of them beat on him. And that video played over and over again, and they were put on trial, and they were acquitted. And then several days of riots happened in Los Angeles. And a question that a lot of people asked when they saw the riots happen is, you're burning down your own neighborhood. Why are you burning down your own neighborhood? How do you think that this is a response to your situation, even if we stipulate that your situation is intolerable and you can't stand it one day more? why is your response to burn down your own neighborhood? And I guess I get tempted to have that same sort of bafflement and that same distancing toward a lot of the Trump voters who seem to go on supporting him even when he makes decisions and he promotes proposals that it seems like are direct attacks on them. I want to say to them, why are you burning down your own neighborhood? But there's an answer to that. A lot of people took the time, even though I think they found it painful to have the question asked. They answered it, and I found a couple of people write little short essays, several paragraph-long essays, trying to explain what those neighborhoods were like and why the question itself was poorly put. In particular, there were, in some of the rioting in Baltimore in about 2016, there was a CVS pharmacy that got burned down, and that's in a neighborhood where it's really very much a food desert, where there are not that many shops available. So you would think having that CVS there, that would be something that the people in that neighborhood depended upon, but people explained it as something like this. When you go about your daily life, you don't look at those businesses as part of your community. Instead, repeatedly, you walk into that business, you walk in with your SNAP card, you walk in with your food stamps, you see the way people look at you, you see all the consumer goods, you see people who are a different color from you walk in with the cash to buy those, and over again, you are reminded that that is not for you. You are excluded from that. When you buy what little you can afford, and it may be with benefits as well, there are these constant reminders day by day, over and over again. And I can use words like day by day and over again and still not be able to convey what it is like. These are feelings that grow up over multiple experiences, over months, over years. And the person who asks the question, why did you burn down your own neighborhood, is taking a snapshot of the situation, is unable or maybe just not motivated to understand the position that the rioters found themselves in after a very long time. The rioters arrived at this decision, this is an academic term, but after they had had the diachronic experience, after they had over and over again been confronted with being denigrated, with being subordinated. And you can only put up with that so many times. It reminds me really of stories I've heard over the years about fights breaking out in middle schools and high schools over a name being called. And you think that's a stupid reason for a fight to break out or for someone to bring a gun to school until you hear that that insult, that name calling, was happening for the zillionth time. And for you, that's a summary of a development. You can't feel the drip, 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 drip of it happening. It's kind of the same reason that adults try to pass lessons along to children and get all kinds of frustrated when the children don't pick up those lessons and internalize them immediately. But the adults arrived at their understanding and their wisdom by living through it. And what they hope to do is summarize that experience and hand it off to the children and think that the children will live that way. Well, the children have to live through their own experiences and get their own lessons. And then when they try to hand the summary on to people coming after them in the next generation, the next cohort, they're not going to understand it as well. That brings me to thinking about the phenomenon, the experience of having a relationship. Having a relationship, two people who have a relationship have a history together. And so they have some understanding for any given moment of how they got to the point they're at, what it took, what unfolded. And when the relationships are between people who are perceptive and empathetic, then that can result in an understanding of complex emotions and complex motives. It can result in an understanding of ambivalence. It can result in an understanding of a choice that you don't think is an ideal choice, but you do feel backed into a corner. And I have been saying since the beginning that I think just about everybody who supported Donald Trump felt backed into a corner. I think something had to happen with a lot of people who can go about their day and make a lot of rational choices, who can build a family, build a home, build a career, and still make these political choices that seem obviously so self-defeating. I think what must have happened is some kind of drip, drip, drip that I can summarize, but that because I've never experienced, because I don't know where it began and how it got to the point where it is today, and I don't know the twists and turns and reversals that happened along the way. And the reason I don't know that is I don't have a relationship. It goes back again to the way that the connective tissue of community is so hollowed out, that I have so few relationships, so few opportunities to observe how people get to the position that they're in, that this can happen. And to go back to my illustration from a long time back of a sneaker wave, it can catch me completely off guard. I can not see this coming at all, not understand other people's reasoning, and wonder, why are you burning down your own neighborhood? Another thing that I spotted this morning, there's a story in the latest issue of The Atlantic about the effect of being powerful on people's empathy. And so people who have a lot of power, a lot of authority, they have a lot of socioeconomic status, they may be high up in the hierarchy of their organization, of their workplace, those people, there are actual simple mental functions that they perform more poorly on. They have more difficulty in taking a picture and arranging it to where someone else can see it. Given that task, they'll tend to arrange it to where it looks right to them instead of to another person. People who are lower in power have an easier time with that. People who are higher in power have a harder time mirroring other people. They're also less likely to laugh along with a crowd. And so, this article goes on to discuss, how if power almost impairs the proper functioning of your brain. And I really think what happens is there are so many differentials in power that other people become, this thought hit me this morning, other people become almost like, to me, a pair of scissors. When I need a pair of scissors, it's because there's a specific task I want to perform. I know what the scissors does, what the pair of scissors does. I know it in kind of a summative fashion. I don't know what factory it came from, and I don't much care. I pick it up, I use it, I put it back. And I think that that's become how we interact with a lot of other people. And so this doesn't give me that much guidance as to what to do in a constructive direction to try to make those relationships more healthy. But it does motivate me to stop asking simple questions and stop thinking that I can take other people's thought process, turn it into a snapshot, pay no attention to where it came from, not remind myself that I wasn't there and I don't know where it came from. And maybe one of the motivating forces to work to have more relationships with people who are different from me is, at the very least, when they make these decisions that seem out and out irrational, maybe if I've been around a little bit more, I have some clues and I have some basis to reach an understanding, and quite possibly things like that won't catch me off guard in the way that they have on this particular occasion.